Today, we're sharing tips for first-timers going to Halloween Horror Nights. We'll get into everything we learned from our experience and share our best tips for you to have the best night possible. Hello and welcome to the Let's Go to Disney podcast. I'm Oliver.
And I'm Lucy.
Today is Sunday, October 13th, and you're listening to episode 57, First Timer's Guide to Halloween Horror Nights. Before we get into today's main topic, here's what's going on in the parks right now. Hurricane Milton hit Florida hard last week and caused some serious damage in some parts of the state, especially on the West Coast. We feel for those affected, and it's so devastating that it's coming so soon after Helene hit. In terms of Walt Disney World, thankfully, it was not heavily impacted at all. There's been some false information shared on social media that there was flooding at the parks and Cinderella Castle. And that's not the case. There was, no damage, at least no serious damage for the most part, which is really nice.
Yeah.
And Disney is back up and running as usual. For those affected, we're thinking of you as you continue to recover. The Little Mermaid, a musical adventure, is going to be the Refresh show that's going to take place in the Refresh Theater over there in the animation courtyard. The previous show had been on hiatus since the pandemic closures, and Disney announced that the new show would be opening this fall. And it's been radio silent since. We're getting towards the end of fall here, so we expect an announcement of some kind soon, so we're going to keep our ear to the ground for that. And Disneyland ticket prices have received an increase, which is normal for this time of year. Price hikes normally occur in the fall right around October, so it's not unusual to hear about this. Single day, single park tickets now can reach a whopping $206 on the busier days like Thanksgiving and Christmas seasons. So yeah, pretty steep prices over there.
Yeah, $206. That's a lot of money for one day.
No, exactly. And to be fair, most people get, well, I guess some people would get single park tickets, but a lot of people get multi-day tickets. True. So it does bring the price down a little bit, but still pretty steep.
Yeah.
All right, it's Canadian Thanksgiving this weekend and today. So for our American listeners, obviously Thanksgiving is still 6 weeks away, but it's always in October up here. So for our Canadian listeners, happy late Thanksgiving, since by the time that, this episode airs, it will have already came and went. We hope you got to enjoy some time and, good food with friends and family this weekend. We're heading to my in-laws this afternoon for a turkey dinner, and my mother-in-law is baking apple pie for dessert, and her apple pie is just unreal.
My mom's baking in general is just unreal.
Seriously, I'm seriously looking forward to that. And I've been pretty good since we got back from our trip, so I'm going to indulge for sure. Yep. And we're in the major swing of things here. So Caleb is doing an indoor baseball clinic this winter and swimming, and Sophia's in dance twice a week and swimming as well. So it's definitely keeping us busy. The days meld into weeks, which meld into months, and before we know it, it's going to be Christmas. Yep. And it definitely feels like it in stores already. Christmas decorations are out in force at our local Costco and other stores. And, really they have been for a while. Lucy and I were just talking about this yesterday. It's like they skipped over Halloween, which hasn't even happened yet. Yeah,
I can barely find Halloween candy at Costco. And I'm like, oh, did I miss something here? But they're just focused very much on Christmas now.
Exactly.
At Costco.
And it's still 2 weeks away.
Yeah.
And really there are two schools of thought on that, right? Some people think it's way too early for Christmas and others love it. We fall into the love it category. We're huge Christmas people and we love starting to see the decorations early. Inevitably, we always buy something new, right? New decorations every year, and it starts to build up the anticipation of Christmas. We also usually start our Christmas shopping fairly early. Mm-hmm. And there's two reasons for that, right? It doesn't feel overwhelming leaving it to the last minute, and it spreads out the spending over the latter half of the year, which is nice. And in the evening and nights here, it's getting below zero. So we already winterized our hoses and air conditioning unit this weekend. I cut the grass for the last time. We're just bracing for the snow that's going to be coming almost certainly
in the
soon.
Next couple weeks here.
It's pretty much 50-50. Usually by Halloween here, there's snow on the ground.
Be nice if this year, even if it's a little cooler, there's no snow so the kids don't have to wear snow pants and boots.
And it's funny too because we always have to buy bigger Halloween costumes because you need to fit a jacket underneath just in case. Yeah, and next weekend we're going to put up some Christmas lights and bring in all the patio furniture for the winter. It seems early for Christmas lights, but I prefer not putting them up, when it's minus 20 and windy. So yeah, there it is.
So with that said, let's get into today's main topic. So as you know, if you've been listening to the podcast for even just a few episodes, and if not, no worries, thank you for joining us today. But we just came back from our most recent trip down to Orlando. And then during this trip, we visited Universal Orlando and we did Hollywood Horror Nights for the very first time. It's definitely been on our radar for some time. So we did do a ton of research going in. And it's funny because Oliver's sister and brother and her husband, our brother-in-law, was here this summer.
Yep.
And my sister-in-law loves this kind of Halloween stuff. And it kind of her talking about wanting to go with her husband next year made us realize, hey, we're going to be there. We should probably do this as well.
Why not? Yep.
So like anything else, actually experiencing it is much different. So we did learn some things, and there are some things that we would and will do differently next time if we go. And we're going to share those with you guys today, just so you don't make the same mistakes. And, mistakes may not be the right word, because we had a great time and did everything that we wanted to do. But there are a couple things that we would change to take off some of the pressure of ourselves, and we would still have gotten to do everything we wanted to do.
Yeah, exactly. So with that in mind, let's get into some of the basics first. So first off, what is Halloween Horror Nights? We'll preface this by saying that it's not Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party, right? So Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party over at Magic Kingdom is like it sounds, right? It's not scary. Halloween Horror Nights is also how it sounds. Kind of horrifying, right? This event is definitely geared more towards teenagers and adults. And in fact, that's Universal's official recommendation in language, right? That children under the age of 13 should not attend. They don't prohibit younger kids, so you can feasibly bring your kids if they're younger than 13. But based on our experience, we wouldn't recommend that. Halloween Horror Nights is legitimately creepy, okay? It definitely has some mature scenes, settings, actors, scare zones, haunted houses. They're all unsuitable for younger kids in our humble opinion. There's no way we would have taken Caleb and Sophia here just because of we know our kids, right? And reminder, they're only 6 and 9, right? So we would definitely wait until they're several years older before taking them to this event or anything like it. But having said that, we did see some kids definitely younger than 13, and they seem to be doing just fine. So like anything else, use your best judgment here. You know your kids best and what they can handle. Another big difference between Halloween Horror Nights and Mickey's Not So Scary is that the event is pretty different year over year. The Halloween Horror Nights are numbered. This year, it's the 33rd year, so it's Halloween Horror Nights 33. It's just sequential like that. Every year, there's a theme, and this year's theme is the duality of fear. They also have scare icons, and this year's icons are named Sinister and Surreal, and that's where that duality comes in. So Sinister is representative of physical pain and suffering, whereas Surreal represents the fear of terror in the mind and that kind of cerebral fear. The haunted houses across the park are also changing every year. So if you go to Mickey's Not So Scary Halloween Party in consecutive years, it's going to be very, very similar, right? So you could skip a year and you're not really missing out. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you go to Halloween Horror Nights in consecutive years, the theme, the icons, the houses they're all going to be different, right? So there are 10 houses mixed between IP and original content and 5 scare zones. There's also a show and some event-specific food, snacks, and merchandise. And during the event, you can, walk through the houses, walk through the scare zone, enjoy the overall atmosphere that Universal sets during this event. We'll give you our thoughts on the whole event at the end of the episode.
Absolutely. So some key points here. Halloween Horror Nights is a separate ticketed event that takes place on selected nights at Universal Orlando Resort, specifically in the Universal Studios Florida Park. This is the side of the park with Diagon Alley. Separately ticketed means that if you had day tickets and were visiting Universal Studios Florida, you would still need an events ticket to be allowed to stay for Halloween Horror Nights. This year, the event started on August 30th and goes through all the way to November 3rd. For the most part, this means every night except Mondays and Tuesdays, so Wednesday through Sunday. If you're planning a trip to Universal and are wanting to attend an event, you'll almost certainly overlap with at least one or numerous event nights. I think when we were there, it was 2, right?
Yep.
Yeah. The event officially kicks off at 6:30 p.m. and actually runs till 2 a.m. But there are several ways to access the park and the event offerings before that, and we'll get into that in just a minute. But if you are a day guest and you are not staying for the event, the park is going to close for those guests at 5 p.m. So if you have a park ticket, you can definitely walk over or take the Hogwarts Express to Islands of Adventure just to continue your day over on that side.
Yep.
And then if not, your day will be cut short and you may want to plan your Universal Studios Florida day or days to be on a Monday or Tuesday when the parties aren't happening to maximize your time in that park. So that's if you don't intend on planning the party.
Yeah, exactly. But since you're listening to this episode, let's assume that you do want to attend the party, right? So here goes. Halloween Horror Nights tickets are date-based, just like your park tickets, right? So you're going to have to select which date you want to attend the event when you purchase your tickets. Single event tickets vary in price. Tickets earlier in the season in the middle of the week tend to be less expensive, and tickets later in the season closer to Halloween on the weekends tend to be more expensive. You can also purchase express passes for the event. So note, there's only one type of express pass for the event. There's no unlimited option in contrast with your regular park tickets,
That's
right? The express pass for the event lets you skip the standby queue at each of the 10 houses once during the event. You won't be able to skip the queue more than once, and you won't be able to double up on any of the houses unless you do it standby, of course. The prices for express pass mirror the event tickets in that they're most expensive closer to Halloween and on the weekends, less expensive earlier in the season and midweek. You can also get a season pass, and Universal calls those frequent fear passes. There are different tiers to these that have more or less blockout dates depending on which tier you get. These would also be useful if you're, planning more than one trip in the season, that 2-month season when the events are happening, or if you're local and you have the freedom to kind of pop in and out. If you're looking for a more premium experience, you could also book an RIP tour, okay, which is essentially the VIP tour. It's just a play on words here. So this is a guided experience that grants you VIP access to everything Halloween Horror Nights has to offer. So think, entry into all the houses, reserved seating at the show, and Universal Express unlimited ride access for all participating attractions for the date of your tour. There's also a private RIP tour, which is essentially the same thing, but it would just be you and 9 others of people right? The standard RIP tour would be grouped with just random other guests. There's also a Behind the Scream, Unmasking the Horror tour that gives guests a lights-on look at the design process for the houses. So there's a 3-house, 2.5-hour tour or a 6-house, 5-hour tour available.
All right, next up, let's get into how and when you can access the park and start to enjoy the event offerings. So, like we said earlier, the parks officially close to the day guests at 5 p.m., but the mix-in with event guests will start before that. So right around 3 p.m., Universal cast members will start to take out partitions and metal fencing to start to create the waiting queues for the houses. And then also at 3 p.m., guests with the Scream Early tickets will start to be let into the parks. And Scream Early tickets are an extra cost on top of the cost of your event ticket and Express Pass if you purchased it. If you weren't a day guest and you did not have the Scream Early tickets, you'll be officially able to enter the parks at 6:30, though in practice, you'll be let into the park likely around 6:15 or maybe even a little earlier. Guests will start to line up to enter the park for the event about an hour or so before 6:30, so you'll definitely want to arrive early. And then if you're a resort guest, there's a dedicated entrance and security checkpoint, so make sure to utilize that so that it's going to be a little less crowded for you.
Yeah, 100%. Now, back to the people in the park for the Stay and Scream zones. So again, if you had Scream Early tickets, 3 p.m. is when you can enter the park. And during that time, you can ride attractions, you can have a bite to eat, whatever you choose to do. Starting at 3:30, both Scream Early guests and day guests will be able to enter the Stay and Scream zones. These are essentially the waiting areas where event guests will be funneled to wait for the event to start, while the park is, being converted for the event. During the day, as you're walking around, you can see some of the less scary and gruesome event sets and decorations and whatnot. The really scary stuff, though, is covered with tarps and blankets so that, you can't really see it.
Scare children.
Yeah, exactly. And the houses are actually behind the scenes, so you're not going to see them as a day guest. They're literally tucked away in places you wouldn't normally go. In previous years, there's been numerous Stay and Scream zones, but this year there's only 2, right? So the first is in the New York area near the Jimmy Fallon and the Mummy attractions, and the other is in the World Expo area near Lombard Seafood Grill. Where you line up is going to depend on which houses you'd like to visit first. So the New York area is closest to Ghostbusters, Insidious, and A Quiet Place. And World Expo is closest to Globin's Feast, Universal Monsters, Eternal Bloodlines, Slaughter Cinema 2, and Museum of Deadly Exhibits. As you can imagine, Kay, the New York Stay and Scream zone is the most popular given that the houses that you can line up for during this early entry time, right? So at this year's event, that's Ghostbusters Frozen Empire, Insidious the Further, and A Quiet Place. These are by far the most popular,
yes.
Okay? It's not even close. And it's important to note that the Scare and Scream zones do fill up, as you can imagine, right? The New York one is going to be the one to fill up first, and it does reach capacity. So if that's important to you, you should definitely head there during the early part of the day, especially if you don't have express passes, right? Those houses, right, the ones we mentioned, so Ghostbusters, Insidious, and A Quiet Place, are going to have the longest lines by far all night.
For sure.
That was our experience. And we check back every now and again just to see what the wait times are. And consistently, they're just high times. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then in terms of how you should play your time during the early part of the event, if you are there for early entry, there's actually 2 ways you can play this. You can line up immediately upon entering, so as early as 3:30 p.m. for one of the houses, or you can mosey around, start snacking at some of the food booths, and then start to enjoy some of the scare zones that are going to slowly start ramping up. But during this early time, team members set up small metal fences all over the park that serve as queues to funnel early entry guests during the first part of the party before they let you go into the houses, into the queues of the houses.
Yeah, exactly.
So the houses are then opened in waves, with Ghostbuster Insidious opening first at 5:15 and then A Quiet Place shortly after that at 5:30. And then all others on from there. Since these houses are the most popular and open first, it definitely makes most sense to line up here. If you are close to the front of the queue for one of those, you'll have actually a very short wait time when guests are let into the houses. This is exactly what we did. We were day guests, so we entered the queue right at 3:30 and we lined up for Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. We were in that queue for about an hour and a half or so before we actually got to walk through the house.
Yeah, exactly. And while Lucy was waiting in line, I actually went and grabbed us a couple of event snacks. We shared the Twisted Tater and the mini Stay Puft S'more.
Mm-hmm.
Around 4:55-ish, so like 20 minutes-ish before it was supposed to open, they moved us along to the front of the entrance near the door to the house. We waited there until it opened officially. We actually saw the scare actors like come out and enter the house. They were wearing like trench coats and like hoods and stuff to hide their costumes and their makeup like somewhat, but everyone was cheering and clapping for them. It was kind of cool.
It was a good way for them to start their day too, probably.
Yeah, exactly. And then pretty much right around 5:15 p.m., we were led into the house. There was maybe like 50 people or so ahead of us. So it took about like 2 minutes to get to the door. And we were out of there like really quickly, and we're actually held while like the masses were entering a quiet place because it was like pretty close to 5:30 at this point. And those guests were entering that house. When they went into their queue, we actually got into the queue for Insidious, which was posted at 50 minutes already. And shortly after we entered the queue, it had swelled to 80 minutes. And that's what we actually ended up waiting. It was like right around 80 minutes.
That was a long wait.
Yeah. And the sun, and it was hot. And yeah. Anyways.
So you certainly don't have to do this. If you don't want to get in queue when you first arrive, you can enjoy some of the snacks like we said. But if we had to do it all over again, we would not have gotten into the standby queue for Insidious after Ghostbusters.
Agreed, yeah.
We learned a hard lesson there.
Yep.
We had express passes, so we knew we'd be able to walk through and skip that queue later, but we really wanted to walk through it twice because that was the one I was probably most excited about, was Insidious. But in retrospect, it just wasn't worth the 80-minute wait time in the beating down sun, shoulder to shoulder with everybody. Hindsight being 2020, this is what we would have done. We would have gotten in line for Ghostbusters like we did. That actually went super well, and we were able to grab some snacks while waiting. Everybody was really chill in that area. People were just sitting, relaxed. Nobody was bothering anybody.
Yeah, exactly. Just waiting.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but when we got out of there, we actually would have just walked through the park, started to check out some of the scare zones and other eats, and then we would have started using our express passes right away. Again, it wasn't a bad experience, but seeing the houses once was actually plenty for us, and it would have made the evening feel a little bit more relaxed. I think that 80 minutes kind of threw us for a little bit of a loop. And again, it's just depends on what's important for you and your party, and if you have express passes. If you don't have express passes, it's a necessity to do this to get a couple of the houses done early. You'll have to be much more strategic with your time at that point. But if you do have express passes, you can use that early time however you see fit.
Yeah, agreed 100%. So the guests without day tickets or Scream early tickets are usually let in, like Lucy said, somewhere around 6:15. And like the other guests already in the park, they can start to enter the queues right away. For these guests, I would actually suggest heading to the other houses by World Expo. So like Goblin Feast, Eternal Bloodlines, as these had like way lower wait times around this time, while Ghostbusters, A Quiet Place, and Insidious all had waits of an hour or more. And really from there, the event is completely yours. Some general considerations to keep in mind is that the event goes till 2 a.m. So the popular houses had high wait times pretty much all night. But after midnight, the wait times do start to go down. So if you're willing to stay till the end, you're going to see those times dip late or early, depending how you look at it, right?
Yeah, so true.
And there's also the show Nightmare Fuel Nocturnal Circus. So don't forget about that, right? So the show happens 4 times at 8 p.m., 9:30, 11 p.m., and 12:30 a.m. The show is phenomenal and definitely worth checking out. It lasts about half an hour. You're going to want to line up for this about a half hour or so before showtime. And the theater does fill up, so be mindful of that. We caught the very first show at 8 p.m. and we were in line for it right around 7:30, right? Yeah. So right around that half hour mark before showtime. We ended up having really great seats and we really enjoyed the show. It doesn't really matter which one you go to. Again, it depends on, how you're structuring your night and where you are in the park.
Absolutely.
But it definitely make sure you head there at some point, right? Don't miss it. We thought that going to the first show was good because we started with the houses on this end of the park after we were done at Ghostbusters and Insidious. So it actually made sense for us given that we were in that end of the park already.
Oh yeah, no, it was the perfect time for us to go. Absolutely. Next up, let's talk about the houses and the scare zones in more detail. So again, there are 10 houses and they're located all over the park. And again, they're backstage, meaning you're actually going behind the scenes all over the park to access the houses, which was kind of cool in itself.
Yep.
So when you walk in the front entrance, on the left behind where Rip Ride Rocket is located is the entrance to Monstrous, the Monsters of Latin America. As you continue towards the back of the park, there's the Quiet Place house right across from Minions Cafe. The Ghostbusters entrance takes you through the lobby of Jimmy Fallon Attraction and then out the back. And then the Insidious and Triplets of Terror house were right at the back, kind of at the far edge of the Rip Ride Rocket track. You can definitely see that while you're waiting in queue.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
These 5 houses are all fairly close together. And then from here, as you walk past Mummy Attraction towards the Fast and the Furious attraction, you're going to find Major Suites Candy Factory House. And then at the far end of the park, in behind the World Expo Theater and the Men in Black attraction, is where the Goblins Feast and the Universal Monsters Eternal Bloodlines houses are located. They're literally right next to each other in big white tents.
Yep. It was kind of like pretty good trek back there. It takes like, I don't know, probably 5 minutes to walk back there.
I was like, oh, okay, here we go. And then coming out of there, as you round the water near the Men in Black attraction, right before the entrance to Springfield is the Slaughter Cinema 2 house. And then not far from there is the entrance to the Museum of Deadly Exhibits. So aside from the houses on the left side of the main entrance, the others are a little bit more spread out.
Yeah, exactly.
And then as for the scare zones, again, there are 5. Right when you enter the park, you have the theme of the year scare zone, the duality of fear. And then up near the Mummy attraction is the torture fair. Near the front of King's Cross is Enter the Blumhouse. And then out near Springfield is the Swamp of the Undead. And then near Mel's Drive-In, or Mel's Die-In, as it's been renamed during the event, is the Demon Queen's scare zone.
Yeah, exactly. And here's how Universal describes the houses and scare zones, okay? This is just to give you an idea of what each one is about and what you might experience while you're in there. Each year they do this, right? They give you like a little, 2-3 lines to kind of describe what the houses are. And then it can kind of give you an inkling of like what you're going to find in there. So A Quiet Place is silence your screams if you want to survive the terrifying post-apocalyptic world. Like the Abbott family, you must keep quiet as you travel from the farmhouse to the woods to the foundry. As you make a sound, monstrous creatures who can hear the slightest noise will hunt you down and silence you for good. Ghostbusters Frozen Empire. He'll chill you to the bone. An ancient artifact has released a chilling new entity, Garaka. He'll stop you cold. Only the Ghostbusters can keep you from getting iced. Insidious is the Further. So don't get trapped in the Further as terrifying demons try to ensnare you. Enter the red-faced demon's lair behind the red door and try to keep away from Keyface so he can't lock up your spirit.
My favorite one.
Universal Monsters Eternal Bloodlines. Get caught in an epic battle as Saskia? Yeah, Van Helsing and the Bride of Frankenstein go up against Dracula's daughter and her monstrous mavens. And Monstruos, the Monsters of Latin America, with La Muerte as your guide. Try to survive the night with 3 terrifying legends. Tlahuelpuchi, sorry for my pronunciation, La Lechuza, and El Silbón.
Slaughter Cinema 2, get ready for the final cut. It's time for another horror movie marathon at the Cary Drive-In. Scream through scenes from creature features, grindhouse gore, and more. The Museum of Deadly Exhibits, a folklore museum's newest exhibit, The Rotting Stone, has released an evil spirit that decays everything, and it's coming for you. Major Suites Candy Factory, you're chaperoning a field trip to a candy factory when the free samples transform the kids into candy-coated killers. I remember that one now. I was trying to remember what that one was, and as soon as I read that description, I said, oh,
meld together. Yeah, exactly.
Goblin's Feast. Enter a goblin village where a feast is being prepared for goblins, orcs, hobgoblins, and witches, and you are the main course. And then the last one, Triplets of Terror. You're invited to the Barmy Triplets' birthday celebration, but their kind of party involves recreating the murders of their entire family.
Yikes. And the scare zones also have descriptions, and here goes. So enter the Blumhouse, escape a terrifying gauntlet of Blumhouse characters, from sinister sadists, from The Purge and Black Phone to Megan dancing in your nightmare. You've never known horror like this. Duality of fear. As soon as you enter the gates of Halloween Horror Nights, you must choose a path. Follow Sinister, the manifestation of visceral horror, or follow Surreal, the incarnation of unearthly terror. Demon Queen, get caught in otherworldly hellscapes ripped from the darkest corners of your mind. 4 merciless queens loyal to surreal rule, surrounded by hordes of fanatical followers.
Swamp of the Undead. In the backwaters, Louisiana, you unwittingly wander onto private property where you're swamped by zombies born from the bodies of other trespassers who were killed and then dumped in a nearby bog. Torture Fair. Come one, come all to Sinister's Renaissance Fair with the devious theme of medieval torture. Brave the gloriously gory homemade torture device till you're put out of your misery. So this should kind of give you an idea of what to expect out of each house and each scare zone, and then kind of give you an indication if this is something you'd be interested in. Fair warning, some of the houses are gorier than others. So if you really don't like it, it's all fake. But if you don't like to see that, I would say probably skip it. Yep. Like we said, these change every year. And really, if you're not local and you don't visit every year, the year you decide to go might be heavily influenced by which houses and scare zones are available in that specific year.
Yeah, agreed 100%, right?
We actually saw a lot of people wearing shirts from like previous years. Yep. And it was kind of fun to see what they've done in the past.
No, exactly. And how you go about these is up to you in terms of what order you do them in, right? But this is how we did it. So after Ghostbusters and Insidious via Standby Queue right early in the night, we went to Goblin's Feast. Goblin's Feast was just okay in our opinion. We may be biased because we had just come from Ghostbusters and Insidious, which were really good. So make of that what you will. The scare actors did a good job and the costumes were well done. There was a heavy emphasis on gore in this one, and it just really isn't my thing. So again, just okay for us. We did Standby here again because the wait was only 10 minutes. This is another thing we would have done differently. So we would have just visited both of the houses here, Goblin's Feast and Eternal Bloodlines, because we didn't end up coming back to Goblin's Feast with our express pass.
Yeah.
We came back out and had another snack. It was the goblin pie, which was essentially a mini apple pie topped with jam, and it was pretty good. Yeah. And after that, we actually got in line for Nightmare Fuel Nocturnal Circus. That's when we saw the show. So the show is edgy, right? Let's just say that. No spoilers here, but there's acrobatics, pyrotechnics, aerialists. Before the show starts, the announcement says the show is, among other things, sexy. And we can confirm it definitely was, right? So there's definitely some more like mature tones to the show, and it's not suitable for younger kids. And again, we did see some in the crowd. No judgment here, to each their own, but just something to be mindful of. Having said that, we will say the performers were extremely talented, and the acrobatics and aerialists are all like, they were really great. It's definitely a well-executed show and a must in our opinion at some point during your evening.
The music was really good too that they used in that show.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So after we were out of the show, that's when we started using our express passes. So we went to Universal Monsters Eternal Bloodline. Then we worked our way around the park in a clockwise from there. So after we came out of that area, we continued on towards Men in Black and we did Slaughter Cinema 2. And then after we came back around and did the Museum of Deadly Exhibits, the entrance for this one was in Springfield. And then from there, we were starting to feel a little bit peckish. So before we decided to grab a bite to eat, we actually went back to the front of the park and did Monstrous, the Monsters of Latin America. And then once we were out of there, we went back towards World Expo and had the pizza fries at the DreamWorks Cafe. These are there every year, apparently, and we enjoyed them. They were quite tasty. They were loaded. Like, It was a hearty dish.
Yeah, it's essentially a pizza with fries underneath, and it's baked and cheesy, and it was pretty good. Yep. And from there, we went back up towards the Fast and the Furious attraction, where we did the Major Sweets Candy Factory house. But actually, right before we went in, we grabbed the Cyclops cup from the Major Sweets Candy food booth, which is like right outside. Mm-hmm. That was the best snack of the night for me. So it's essentially a frozen peanut butter cup. It had like a chocolate coating and a kind of like peanut butter mousse cream on the inside. And it was right up my alley. I loved it.
Yes.
We went to the house right after that. And from here, we went back across towards the Mummy, where the entrance to Triplets of Terror and Insidious are located. So we wanted to finish the night with what we consider to be the top three houses, right? So we wanted to see Insidious, Ghostbusters again, and as well as The Quiet Place, which we hadn't done yet. We did Triplets of Terror first, and then we did Insidious for a second time, Ghostbusters for a second time, and we finished with A Quiet Place. That was actually the very last one we did.
Yes, that was.
At this point, it was just after midnight. We were stuffed. We didn't want to eat anymore. We'd seen all the houses, some twice. We'd seen the show and each scare zone, and we called it a night from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So when it comes to the scare zones, we had to put some thought into that before the event to make sure we'd be able to walk through each one at some point. But what we found is just by virtue of walking around the park, from house to house and then around the snack booths, we actually ended up walking through each of them a couple times, if not more.
Yep.
So just like the houses, we like some better than others, but our favorite was Demon Queens. The decor and the actors in this zone were really well done, and we actually really enjoyed it. There were also pop-up mini shows, I guess you could call them, in the scare zones at any given time. One of the Demon Queens was making a speech when we were walking through, and Sinister was up to no good at the Torture Fair scare zone when we were walking through there. I was expecting some scare actors in each zone, but I was actually kind of shocked just to see how many there were.
Agreed. There was so many of them.
At first, you almost think, is this just a regular park goer?
Yep.
And then you're like, oh no, that's an actor. There's a lot of them walking around just doing their thing. They're creepy, especially when the sun goes down and they kind of come up towards you.
Yeah.
They won't ever touch you. Don't worry about that. They're not allowed to. But you really don't need to worry about that part, I promise. Remember, it's a team member under there, and they're just trying to go with the vibe and give you an immersive experience. They will try and scare you, but they're going to respect your space. So just please respect theirs as well.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of the houses, some were better than others in our opinion, like the same as the scare zones, right? So our favorite house for the IP, but also the set pieces and like the costumes and the overall feel of the house was Ghostbusters.
I felt like I was in the movie.
Yeah, exactly. But the scariest was Insidious. There was a lot of jump scares in that one that really got us. And there's a scare actor that got me as I was exiting the house during the first walkthrough we did. So we were basically, back outside. I could see the light of day. And I had
almost there.
Exactly. I dropped my guard already because I thought we were done. But right then an actor popped out and I jumped. And there was a sheriff standing right outside the door with the cast member. And he doubled over laughing. He got a really good kick out of that. I did too. I was laughing for probably 2 minutes straight after that.
It was the perfect scare. And Oliver said he had literally dropped his guard down. He could see the light. He was like, okay, I survived that. Nope, that was the biggest scare for him.
Yeah, exactly. Right at that moment.
It was great. And I was behind him, so I got to, it was perfect.
Oh, God.
So with that said, here's our overall thoughts on the event after having gone for the first time this year. So first off, it is a really great event in terms of the planning, effort, and execution. The houses are really well done for the most part. The scare zones are well decorated, and the scare actors are plentiful. They are amazing actors. Props to them.
Agreed.
There's a ton of food and snack options available during the party. The show is excellent, and at nearly 30 minutes long, it actually feels really worth the time to stop, wait in line, and then experience that during the evening at some point. Would we do this again? Yes, hands down, I love horror. This to me was perfect. Now, we don't feel like we would need to go more than once a year. And if you can get everything done in one night, I don't feel like I would need to go over and over during the course of a season. But year over year, especially because the houses and scare zones get refreshed every year, we would definitely do that again. I love the idea that it gets refreshed.
Yeah, that's nice.
And there's always new movies coming out that they can utilize.
Yeah.
But like we said, we likely would have taken the first bit of the party a little bit easier. So after that first house, we would have probably been more relaxed and then started using our express passes right away.
Yeah, agreed 100%. So what's your big key takeaways?
You know what? Honestly, for me, as such a lover of horror and scary movies, I just was like, they did such a great job. Insidious is one of my favorite movies. I know you hate them, but I love them. I was so impressed with the actors, the sets. I would have loved to, it was almost hard. You're trying to take it all in as you're walking through it. I was so impressed. Ghostbusters was really well done. That one didn't scare me as much. I had a couple of moments, but the Insidious one, even the Triplets one was really creepy too.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, that was a good one
I just thought it was so well done. Definitely if you're a fan of horror, and even if you're a fan of movies and the idea of being on a set, I just thought it was wonderful. And
not to compare Mickey's Not So Scary, but
different.
and I feel like there's just, maybe it's because the park feels smaller and there was a lot going on, right? It feels like you walk a little bit, then you're in a scare zone and there's music playing and it feels like it's busy, right? There's a lot going on.
Yes, absolutely. So what's your biggest key takeaways?
Yeah. So for me specifically, as you know, right, I'm not a big horror guy, right? Or I'm not a scary movie guy.
Lucy gets scared.
Exactly. Lucy loves that and me not so much, right? So I was apprehensive going in.
You were, yeah.
And like Lucy said earlier, we didn't actually even plan on going. We weren't going to go, but again, my sister was talking about potentially going next year, and so it got us talking. And we're like, you know what? Why don't we try it? We've never done it. Let's just do it and see what happens.
And
right?
You knew about the Ghostbusters IP, and you do love Ghostbusters, so I think that kind of was a bit of a draw to you.
Yeah, exactly. I did like the idea of visiting that house, right? And despite the fact that I'm not a huge fan, I can appreciate the good effort and the thought and the planning that goes into it. And I did enjoy it, right? Even though it's not really my thing. So I'd say if you're on the fence, give it a try. You might really enjoy it. Having said that, I know some people, it's really, really not their thing. It's not my thing.
My dad too would be like, no, thank you.
And if it's not your thing, that's totally okay as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that said, thank you so much for joining us today to talk Halloween Horror Nights. We hope that sharing our first experience with you guys will either help you decide if this is something you may want to do or not do. And then it hopefully will give you some ideas on how you can go plan your event or your evening if you are going to do it.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. And if you could leave us a rating and review, it would be greatly appreciated. It helps us increase our reach so that we can be found by more folks planning Disney and Universal trips. And you can leave reviews right on Apple Podcasts. And for Spotify, you can leave a rating.
You can also find us on Instagram and TikTok at letsgo.disney, as well as on our Facebook page, Let's Go to Disney. We share some helpful reels here as well as some fun ones. And then the link tree in the show notes will take you to all of our socials.
Have a great day and we'll see you real soon.